Oh my gosh, we are here. We made it. We made it till Friday. Not that it's any different than
honestly
any other day. My girlfriend was calling it Blur's Day.
I know. I was saying that too. My teens did not find that very funny. I'm like, isn't that hysterical? They're like, Mom, it's not that funny. I'm like, all right, maybe it's a generational thing.
Yeah, exactly. My kids just don't think I'm funny, period, at all. Yeah. So, well, I'm so grateful that you were able to take time out of your schedule. I know you're busy. I was reading all about stuff that you do and working with Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, it's just so incredible. I know we're still waiting for a few folks to join, but I would love to know, for those who are joining, where are you joining from? And just kind of say hi and see how we're doing. I don't know if I can actually see here's what's weird. So we're in this third-party program running it, but I don't know if I can actually see the comments as they come in.
Hold on, maybe if I pull up on my other computer.
Like, how many computers does it take to have a Facebook Live?
Let's see.
All right, so I can't see the things here, but I can see them on my phone. Okay, so we've got someone from Terrell, Texas. We've got Jane from Pennsylvania, and Bruce, my good friend, coach, mentor. Spirit Junkie is in California at Channel Islands Beach, where she writes, works, and plays. All right, very cool. Well, we've got Spring, Texas. Nice. So why don't you take just a second and tell us who you are, a little bit about your background, what you do.
Who am I? What is the meaning?
Deep question. Cheers, yes. By the way. Cheers.
Oh, cheers. Yes. Who am I? Where do I want to go with that? Now, so by training, I am a psychologist. I have a couch that I bring with me everywhere. No,
nice.
I started my career off, I actually am a physical therapist and was a practicing physical therapist for several years. And one day was working with a gentleman. I mean, there's so much psychology in physical rehab, as you can imagine. And one day I was working with this guy and he had just had an amputation, a surgical amputation, which I worked at a VA hospital. Like half my clients didn't have legs, right? So it was kind of a normal thing for me. But this guy came down angry, depressed, like yelling, send me back to my room. So I'm like, okay. So I sent him back to his room, and we did rounds talking about all the patients with the docs and the nurses and the therapists, and everyone agreed that this guy was depressed, right? Okay. And it was the next statement that changed my life forever. The attending physician, the surgeon who literally cut his leg off, was like, I'll prescribe him Prozac. And I thought, shouldn't we maybe talk to him about his experience with losing a limb? Like, I don't know. I'm a PT. I don't know anything about psychology, but it was kind of like the heavens open up and they're like, oh, this is my calling. So I went back.
Prozac is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Time without a doubt. Absolutely. And when you just cut off a man's leg, even if you choose to give him Prozac, could we also help him process the loss of So I went back to school, and then I got to a point in my private practice where I really was, I realized that, I worked with people who were depressed or who were overeating or who were on the verge of divorce. And I realized if I could see them before they got that bad, we could actually prevent all that from happening, or a lot of it from happening. So that's when I wrote a book on happiness. we were talking about TV. I started doing a lot of TV, a lot of speaking, and really kind of, I say my motto is helping people before they need the proverbial shrink couch, there are tools and skills that we all can learn and would benefit from learning to be able to deal with things like stress and be more resilient. I know you know something about that. So, kind of helping people develop these skills of how to deal with whatever life throws at them. Because not all of us, luckily, have our leg amputated, but we all deal with loss. We all deal with disappointment. We all deal with stress. And so helping people have those tools so that they can be empowered to move forward.
Absolutely. And I know people, I don't know if you experience this, but like if I'm traveling somewhere, people are like, what do you do? And I say I'm an author first, just because when I say I'm a motivational speaker, they're like, can you say something to motivate me? And so I'm sure if you tell people I'm a therapist, I was watching a TED Talk and she goes, if you were a gynecologist, people don't just go, hey, can you give me a pelvic exam?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear it a lot at cocktail parties. But that's okay because I love hearing people's deepest, darkest secrets anyway. So
yeah. Well, I don't know. Mental health is something that has been, my life, my purpose now, I feel like, is mental health. My son, Evan, turned 17 today. Holy cow, I cannot believe it has gone by that fast. But, he's severely mentally ill and autistic, and have been in therapy with him and for him and because of him in some way, shape, or form for the last 17 years. And so I would love your take on, I think a couple of competing things have been happening. One, I hear people say, like, why am I so tired? Why am I so sad? Why am I depressed? No one in my life is directly affected. And I don't think that's even possible. I think everybody's affected, and we're forced so far out of our habit patterns. But the other competing thing is I'm afraid to feel good because I feel guilty. I don't. So many people have stuff going on. I feel guilty.
Yes, because your misery will then counter their misery.
Yes.
He said sarcastically. Yeah. So first of all, there's an energy right now on this earth that is really stressful, right? With all that's going on. So whether you are ill or someone who is ill, it doesn't matter. There's a lot going on, first of all. Second of all, there's this concept called learned helplessness, and I'm sure you're familiar with this term. Learned helplessness is basically the notion, there's nothing I can do. And way back in the 70s, maybe even late 60s, they had this study that was really interesting. They had dogs, randomly assigned dogs to 3 different groups. Now, I'm not comparing humans to dogs, but we couldn't do this with humans. So, and what they do is the first group of dogs, every time they hit the lever, they got food. Hit the lever a couple times, ate, pranced off, satiated, happy as could be. Second group, see, we gave them food.
He's crying, so.
Second group, every time they hit the lever, they got an electrical shock. They hit it once, maybe twice, said, not for me, pranced off, happy as could be. Third group, every time they hit the lever, they didn't know what was going to happen. Sometimes they got food, sometimes they got a shock. And those dogs actually ended up in the corner, like cowering in the corner. And even if you brought the dog food, it wouldn't eat. It induced a state of depression. That learned helplessness is a lot of what's going on right now, right? You can't leave your house. You can't interact. You can't go to work. You can't go to restaurants. There's a lot that we can't do. And so this sense of learned helplessness is really impacting a lot of people, I think, without realizing it.
What do you say to people who are like, well, I'm afraid to feel good because I feel guilty because everyone else is going through such horrible things?
That's eat what's on your plate because they're starving kids in China. I don't know, like that was a thing when I was growing up.
Yeah.
That literally makes no sense, right? Like if you are less happy, it's not like that happiness potential goes to someone else. And in fact, I view it as our responsibility for those of us who can be happy, for those of us who can have positive energy, because we need to be countering all the negativity and all the overwhelm and stress that's out there. It's not like you're happy because people are miserable. You're happy because that's who you are. You're happy because you're hopefully doing some really great self-care and some good work on yourself to raise your energy, to be in a state of gratitude as opposed to focusing on what's wrong. So the more each one, I truly think one of the reasons this is happening, if we really take a step back and said, if there were something positive that came out of this, what would it be? I really view it as this is a time for us all to take a step back, to focus on our self-care, to focus on helping us be the best us we can be without going out into the real world, and developing those skills and those habits so that when the doors open up and we go back to interacting with others, we have those skills. And
you said something, Amy was sharing this with me, that you said your thoughts are the most powerful predictors of your health and happiness. And I totally agree. I know that as someone who struggled with depression my whole life, I teach this as well, right? That your beliefs drive your behavior. Yeah. What do you say to folks who are like, well, how can I go from feeling like this sucks and it's horrible to this is great? And I don't believe that your brain can go from one to the other, but what do you do if your thoughts are sabotaging you? Like if you keep finding your thoughts being self-defeating?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of things you could do. The first thing is to realize, oh, my thoughts are going there. This isn't the truth. This is where my thoughts are going, and realizing the power of that. Scientists say we have 65,000 thoughts every single day, right? Over 35% are negative. So it's what's going on with our brain. It's how do we choose to focus? And understanding that if your goal is to overall think in a positive way, that's about rewiring your brain. Right? When I work with clients, I do something called neuroregenerative training, which basically is a mouthful saying, teaching people how to rewire your brain, right? You didn't come out of your mama's womb thinking life is tough, or I'm not good enough, or this is overwhelming. That has been learned by you, by us, and anything learned can be unlearned and relearned. But it doesn't just happen with a quick affirmation, right? It's not like if you just say, I believe in myself, you're gonna be like, I got it. Because what's gonna happen? Part of you, your inner critic, is gonna say, no, I don't. I really don't believe myself. And so it is a process, but the first step of the process of changing that is to say, wow, there's a thought that I have. And one of my coaches has the saying of interesting point of view. So when you notice a thought that you don't particularly like, instead of beating yourself up, instead of saying, oh, this is the way, I'm stuck here. No, just be like, interesting point of view. Yeah. I used to be a worrywart. Like, give me a topic and I'll worry about it. I just come up with topics to worry about. And I remember distinctly, I was at Broad and 15th in Philadelphia. I was getting my degree at Medical College of Pennsylvania. And there was another woman, her name is Robin, and she was a worrier too. And I remember standing out there, we were waiting for our Chinese food from one of those trucks outside. And I remember saying to her, you don't have to worry all the time. Like, you can actually change your brain. And as I was saying it was one of those, you probably had this experience where you're giving advice and you're like, oh, that was for me. Yeah, that I meant that for me. But I literally was like, oh, I don't have to do this. I have literally rewired my brain so I'm not a worrier anymore. Did it happen overnight? And no, of course not. But you can do this. It's just, it's a process. I mean, it's like you if you want to lose weight, this is an overused analogy, but it's a good one. You change your diet and you work out consistently, and eventually you get.
Why didn't I lose weight? I did one push-up.
Hi, I had a salad 3 weeks ago. What is going on? Yeah. But I think for some reason, I don't know why it is. People get the behavior, they get the physical health, but they don't understand like how we view the world is just a learned skill. My grandmother was a batty old woman, God bless her, and she was a psychiatric nurse. So all of us in mental health, I think, have a little battiness in us. But she also was an incredible piano player, and she never actually graduated from university. Somehow she taught a college course, and the college course that the title she gave the course was How to Play the Piano Despite Years of Practice. How to play the piano. So she'd get rid of the bad habits that her students had. She'd teach the right habits, and then they would practice. And you can imagine, if you get rid of what doesn't work, you learn what does work and you practice it, you literally cannot help but get better at the piano. Like, it's impossible. Right. So I help people be happy despite years of practice, because I think a lot of times in society we get on this treadmill of what we think will bring us happiness, right? If I get that job, if I get that degree, if I get married, if I get divorced, whatever it is, we think that's what's going to bring us happiness. And those are kind of those skills that aren't really the right ones. But when you learn the right ones, whether it's happiness or how to be resilient, whatever it is, when you learn the right skills and you practice them, you literally can't help but strengthen those neural connections so that they eventually become automatic.
Yeah, I think Rick Hansen calls it or experience-dependent neuroplasticity. The more you think and behave a certain way, the easier it is to think and behave that way.
Exactly, and there are other ways to strengthen that too. But yeah, that's exactly it.
Like what? What are some other ways to strengthen it?
Emotions. I have this analogy. It's called the thought field theory, and it's this notion of if you're on one side and I'm on another side of this tall field of grass, right? And I want to come over to your side, what can I do? Well, I can take this path, let's say. And so if I take this path, what happens to the grass? It gets trampled down. Next time I want to come over and play, where am I going to go? I'm probably going to take the path of least resistance, right? You do that long enough, what happens to the grass? It's not there anymore. That's what a thought is, right? That's what a belief is. It's a well-trodden path. If I say, oh, today I'm going to take this path, What happens to that grass? It gets trampled down. But next time, which path am I more likely to take? That first one, because there's no grass on there. Yeah. But when we have emotion, it's like going on that pathway as an elephant instead of an ant, right? It tramples down. So that's why emotion, that's why stuff like PTSD is so, we can form a belief and an experience in a second, because trauma is such a heightened emotion. It's the same thing with positive emotions too. So, it's that experience, but it's also bringing in the emotion of the experience that will make it heavier and stick longer.
Well, and speaking of trauma, Anne just said, when people feel trapped, they thrust into survival mode. Sexual, child abuse, and domestic abuse is often not escaped for a lot of people. You need to prepare for the aftermath. How do you do that? And while you're thinking of your answer, I just want to encourage you guys, chat in questions. I mean, this is a free therapy session. Doesn't get much better than that. What do you think about
I'm a visual person, so I'm reading it. Is often not escaped. Yeah, well, because a lot of times our brain, it is human nature for our brain to want to make sense out of stuff, right? And just an example, if someone says, oh, that person has lung cancer, first thing people think is,
smoker.
They smoke. They smoke, right? And if you say, no, they didn't smoke, people get uncomfortable with that, because lung cancer and smoking makes sense, right? But if you didn't smoke and someone has lung cancer, that doesn't make sense. We, by nature, try to make sense out of stuff. When people experience trauma, they often try to make sense out of it. And if we don't address that, and it's an automatic thing, it's sometimes we change our perception of what happened, and sometimes we create a new rule. So, example, let's say a woman goes to a bar and goes home with a man and gets raped. Usually there are two responses to that. One, all men are horrible, or two, I shouldn't have worn a miniskirt, right? So they're trying to make sense out of that. It's all men are horrible, or I shouldn't wear a miniskirt. I mean, that's obviously a complete simplification. There are a gazillion interpretations that could happen, but those are two of the main ones. Why? Because we're trying to make sense out of it. But no, it's not really a conscious thing, it's a subconscious thing. So if that's what goes into your brain, and then you try to move on, you try to go on with life, but that's so ingrained in your brain, that's going to continue to impact you. And, the more you push something down, it's almost like if you push a ball in the water down, right? You can push it down for a while, but you keep pushing, the pressure gets so great, it pops up. Yeah. That's what happens a lot when we try to push those emotions, that experience away without actually processing it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people don't realize, at least for me, when Evan went to the therapeutic boarding school in Idaho, I started going through EMDR, which is trauma therapy, because lots of post-traumatic stress, there was a lot of physical, emotional abuse from him toward us. And I'm sure he experienced his share of trauma just having to navigate the world that he's in with the brain that he has. But what I was surprised to learn is that it's actually easier to treat one major traumatic event than it is to treat a whole history of trauma. So for example, from the day he was born, it's been a challenge. And when I started going through it, the therapist was like, all right, tell me about the first memory. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's like a whole long thing. Yeah. Why is that it's easier to deal with a specific event trauma than a collection of trauma?
Well, I mean, that's like saying, why is it hard to carry 85 bricks instead of one brick, right? Okay. Because each one is a traumatic event. So, each one just compiles on the other. It makes all kinds of sense. Because if you haven't addressed that one, it's another brick, and it's another brick, and it's another brick. And yeah, you can handle a couple bricks, but 85,000, right. If you really figured out how many traumatic events you've had for these 17 years, it could be like 85,000 bricks that you were carrying around.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I think one of the things that my therapist has told me is to name, like, whenever you have that self-critical voice, like, I know for me, if I don't get a speech, or if a book deal doesn't happen or something, then it's easy to go, oh, well, I knew I couldn't do that. And so she suggested I name that voice. So I named mine Helga, and I imagine her, this like huge Russian woman with a rolling pin, wearing an apron, beating people up. And so when I hear that voice, I'm like, screw it, it's just Helga.
Yeah. And the beauty of that, my second TEDx was actually about inner critic, and I named mine Misty is mine. The great thing about that is, instead of it, because we have all these thoughts, we don't realize that they're even going through our minds, right? We just kind of accept them as fact. And yet most of our thoughts are not remotely factual. The majority of our thoughts are perceptions, they're interpretations, they're how we, assumptions that we make. So when you name it, it takes it away from yours to something that's not you. Because your inner critic isn't you, it's just a voice that's inside of your head. Yeah. So yeah, that's really great. Some people call it their mother-in-law's name. I don't know. I'm not telling you how to name it, but it can be really helpful because then you have more control over it. Instead of it, again, infiltrating and kind of taking over your mind, that allows you to take control and give yourself some distance.
And, in therapy, and I'm sure there's several other approaches I'm not aware of, but one of the more common is cognitive behavioral therapy, where you identify distorted thoughts and you identify, whether they're true or not and how to reframe them. But more recently, I've been really practicing mindfulness, which is not trying to change the thought, it's just acknowledging it. But I think that the combination is probably pretty helpful. Would you?
There's actually something called mindfulness, I think CBT. So yeah, I was actually trained by Dr. Beck. So he was the founder of, one of the founders of CBT. And I do a lot of mindfulness too. It's really so powerful just to be aware. I say, if you could stick a proverbial microphone in your brain, what are you hearing yourself saying? And sometimes just being aware, sometimes I was just talking to a friend of mine and I was like, I try to be really, I'm all about being empowered. And we were talking before about, my husband's really ill and we're struggling with all that. But I try to be really, focusing on what can I do as opposed to what can I do. And I was having a conversation with my friend and I was like, oh my God, I'm totally being a victim right now. And it was like, just acknowledging that's where my mind was going was enough for me to be like, okay, I'm U-turning here. This is not, the kind of thoughts I want to have. It's not who I want to be. But yeah, that just being aware, that mindfulness is so powerful.
Yeah, for me, the harder part is not being aware of it. It's not needing to change it. Because when I have one of those thoughts, my first instinct is, well, I better fix my head because it's broken, instead of just going, okay, well, it's just a thought like any other thought, and it's just there for information. And we have some questions. Okay, so I struggle with toggling between sensory overload with all the speculation that's out there in terms of symptoms, immune responses, researching possible things that might help treat symptoms. I'm now taking zinc, elderberry, A, B, C, and D, and F, G, P, Q, and R, and I want to shut it all off and not listen or look at anything else. Any suggestions?
Kristen, you have permission from the doctor to turn off the news, to stop researching, and just live. Absolutely. There's this concept for a lot of people, I got to do more, I got to do more, I got to do more. Ironically, that's probably increasing your stress, which weakens your immune system, which makes it more likely to get sick. So yeah, if that's what you want to do, don't do it. Just focus on self-care right now. And it doesn't have to be perfect self-care, right? It doesn't have to be, I have to have everything right. The whole, all self-care means just bringing yourself into a better state for you. So if that means taking a warm bath, if that means watching a funny movie, if that means hopping on, a Facebook Live and having a glass of wine, that's great. And again, I truly believe that is what this time is for. So there's a lot of, I wrote a book on perfectionism. I am a recovering perfectionist. And so that notion of I have to get all the right things so then I'll be healthy. No, the best thing you can do right now is give yourself a break. I would stop researching that stuff, because here's the thing. If something comes out that you need to know, I promise you're going to hear it. Right? You don't have to search through all the journals. You will hear. If the world is ending, you will hear. If a cure happens, you will hear. Although it was funny, I was on a webinar, and this was like right as this all started happening. It was one of the first companies that hired me to talk about mental well-being during this time, and they also had an MD who was in public policy at Hopkins, and he's like, people are talking about the cure. We need the cure. We need the cure. He's like, we have the cure. It's called soap. Use it, which I thought was music, but yeah, give yourself a break. If that's what you want to do, then do it. Stop stressing out about it. Your stress is probably worse than missing a day of elderberry or any of that. So give yourself a break is what I would say.
And I'm curious, my other dogs.
Now I'm feeling guilty that I closed the door on my dog. So
he likes climbing on the couch and nesting and taking all the cushions off. So I have we have another question, and then I have one for you. But this one is from Yolati. She said she's become an underfunctioner because she constantly feels overwhelmed by all the to-dos. Man, I can relate. Yeah. Is that coming from chronic anxiety?
Well, it's coming from shitting all over yourself. Using
I saw your video. Yeah.
I should do this. I should do that. And it's interesting because I was doing this because I'm one of those people where I'm like, all right, bring it on. Like, I got free time. What am I going to do? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to edit this book. I'm going to create a course. I'm going to clean my basement. And I was encouraging people to do that. And then I realized there's one group of people who that's really helpful for. And there's a whole nother group who's like, no, I can't do it. Again, this is a yin, not a yang energy. This is a time to be and take care of yourself. Really look at that to-do list. Is it a must do, or is it I feel like I should do it because everyone else is learning new languages and trying new recipes and cleaning their basement? Or y'all don't know what a basement is in Texas. It's this floor that goes below the ground, but you have closets and everything. So, but yeah, no, it's
where we hide our children.
Say again.
The closet. It's where we hide our children.
Yeah, that's what a basement is for us. We just kind of. So this is a signal that anxiety can be a good thing because it's a signal that too much is going on right now. So what can you take off that list? What can you delegate? One of the things I've been talking so much about lately is this concept of being assertive. Be assertive. If you are stuck at home with your family, with your partner, I don't care how long you guys have been together, he or she cannot read your mind. And let's be honest, you're glad they can't read your mind, right? When you need something, let them know. I need 30 minutes to myself right now. If you've got kids running around, partner can take care of it. If you've got kids running around and you don't have a partner, hear me say 30 extra minutes of screen time for your children will not ruin them. And if that is what you need right now, honor that.
Yeah. And, one of the interesting things that I talk about in my work is this research done by Aaliyah Crum at Stanford. Kelly McGonigal talks about it in her TED Talk, and the upside of stress, which is, it's not necessarily the stress that's bad for us. It's the belief that the stress is bad that's bad for us. And I realized that chronic long-term stress left unaddressed is not good for your health. It creates all kinds of havoc on your body. But how do you differentiate that? Is it more that acute stress is more the way you look at it, and long-term chronic stress? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so stress is just a heightened state of arousal, right? If we want to get scientific. Then there's distress, which is all the emotions you don't want to associate with stress: fear, anxiety, worry, helplessness, hopelessness, guilt, shame. And then there's eustress, which is excitement. Right. So when we get into a state, a great example, and you're a professional speaker, a great example is when someone gets on stage, right? Most people get a little, maybe their heart starts racing or they're, something their stuff. But how do you interpret that? Is it, holy crap, like I better not screw up? I better, what if I forget what I'm supposed to say? Or is it, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to share this message with people?
Right.
So it's how we interpret it. But stress is also when you notice that stress, and I always talk about there are 3 red flags that let us know when stress or distress is getting out of control. When you notice it, it's just, okay, what am I going to do now? It's kind of like if you touch a burner or a hot plate and you go, oh, that's hot. It's just information. It's biofeedback. And so if you can use that, what I call those red flags, then you can say, okay, I'm experiencing heightened stress right now. I need to do something healthy and helpful to reduce it. Right. So the red flags are when you notice an intense emotions. Sometimes you don't notice it. Sometimes it's your family who notices them. I was actually talking to a household name that everyone would know, and I was just talking about this, and they're like, "No, I'm doing fine with all this." And their partner was on the Zoom call too, and their partner's like, You have been so irritable lately. And they didn't even realize it. So sometimes you realize those emotions. Sometimes your family, they give you that feedback. So emotions you don't want, physical sensations you don't want. When I was working on my doctoral dissertation, I distinctly remember walking by a mirror, and this is what I looked like. Like my ears and my shoulders were one because there was so much tension in my neck. I didn't even realize I had stress in my neck. I didn't even know I was having these symptoms. And when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah. And then I realized it. That's the second red flag. And then the third red flag is when you engage in behaviors you don't want to. Maybe you're reaching for, an 8th glass of wine, or, you're yelling at your kids, or you are not doing what you want to do. So maybe you're avoiding the exercise, you're procrastinating on something. Those red flags will let you know what, stress is impacting me maybe in a way that isn't healthy or helpful for me. So let me address it.
So just to make sure, I wrote those down because I think it's helpful. So the 3 red flags when you're going through stress are: 1, when the emotions are ones that you don't want. The second is when there are physical symptoms you don't want. And the third is that when you engage in behaviors that you don't want.
Exactly.
And what, I did a session today for one of our corporate clients on resilience, and I was explaining the emotional management process. And, basically I use the exact same example that you do. When you touch a stove, you don't go, that's burning my flesh, I should think about removing. And it's just an immediate reaction. And the emotions are neurobiological. They're contagious more than the coronavirus. They are something that we cannot control. They're simply information. It's our interpretation of the emotion, the way we think about it, that drives the response. And that's where we get to take back control, how we interpret it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, emotions are caused by our beliefs and our interpretations, right? So if someone doesn't call me back and that makes me sad, it's because I'm interpreting it as they don't care about me. If someone doesn't call me back and I'm happy, it's because I'm interpreting, thank God I don't have to talk to that person. Right. But it's just feedback, and that's the beauty of it. Yeah, we're probably familiar, and I'm forgetting the term right now, and you may have it in your smart brain, but there are people who can't feel physical pain. And whereas some people are like, wow, that'd be great. It's not that great. Actually, when I was a physical therapist, when people have diabetes, sometimes they lose feeling, especially in their feet. And we would literally do foot checks and have them do foot checks. And there were multiple times when we would have them check their feet, and there was something stuck in it, a nail, a splinter, a tack that they've been walking around in for I don't even know how long, because they couldn't feel it. That's not helpful. That is actually what leads to the amputations that can happen because of that neuropathy. But emotions, just like physical sensations of pain, they're really helpful to give you that feedback to understand what's going on up here.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the way I learned it, and maybe this is backwards, so you can correct me, but the way I learned it, there's like a triggering event, like the person doesn't call you back, and the emotion is sadness. Then the thought is they must not like me. So the trigger creates the emotion, which generates the interpretation. Do I have it backwards?
If you were doing a brain scan, that is what you see. But what happens is there's it's the subconscious that we aren't really seeing, like in our frontal lobes, that goes to why we're feeling sad. Because if you don't have the belief, and it goes into our core beliefs of we're not worthy, we're not we're not lovable enough, we're not good enough. Those core beliefs that generate kind of that subconscious. Right. But if someone has a belief that they are everything, they believe in themselves, and when someone doesn't call them, that won't make them feel badly about themselves.
True. Very true.
So I know that when we do brain scans, that is what we see, but there's a deeper subconscious that's fueling that initial emotion, or else you would never have that emotion.
Yeah, and I think that at least the research that I've read said our emotional brain is 80,000 times faster than our logical brain. It's like impossible to think before you have an emotion driving it.
Right. Yeah. Because it's so automatic. And of course, can't just molecules of emotion, right? So it's not just in our brain that those molecules are, they're everywhere, especially in our gut, but they're everywhere. So yeah.
Let's see. Sasha asked, are there indicators to keep in mind if you relax for self-care, maybe relaxing too much and underachieving. It's that balance of how do I know how to take care of myself versus when is 8 hours of Tiger King time to call it a day.
Is 8 hours of Tiger King really fulfilling? I mean, I think that there's a
oh yes, it is. Carol.
Well, yeah, okay, and if it is, then that's great. I mean, that's what's important. There was an interesting study where they asked, it just happened to be nurses. They asked nurses to document every 15 minutes how they were spending their time, and they were the study was supposed to go on for a couple of weeks, and they had to stop the study early. And the reason why they had to stop the study early was because the nurses, like, they almost became depressed because they looked at how they were spending their time and what was really important to them, and there was no relationship. So if 8 hours of Tiger King is working, great, then go with it. I know I'm going to say, Sasha, I've never met you, but I'm going to guess the fact that you're asking about underachieving makes me think that you probably never have to worry about underachieving, because usually only overachievers
underachieving.
So I'm going to go back to being better than perfect and focusing on, you don't have to be perfect. It's not like there's a perfect amount of time of self-care. And in fact, again, this is the time for self-care. This is the time to develop these habits. So Sasha, give yourself a break. I very much doubt that you are relaxing too much, and maybe redefine what relaxing is to you, because it sounds like to you relaxing is more of a luxury. I would say it's a necessity. I would say it's just as important as making sure that you get a balanced meal, balanced nutrition in your life. So.
Yeah. And it's so important. Like, self-care is, I always say, it's not selfish. It's a requirement for resilience. You cannot build resilience. And it doesn't have to be like a swim across the Atlantic. It could be staring out the window for 5 minutes and just giving your brain some time to rest. Or I get on the floor and snuggle with the dogs and smell their puppy breath. And that's self-care, right? It's just anything you do that calms you and gets you out of that sympathetic fight or flight and back into the parasympathetic rest and digest, so that you can take back control rather than stay out in reactivity.
That's exactly it. And we know that, you said before how our energy is infectious, right? Our emotions are infectious. And so when we're in a heightened state, if you are a parent, I promise you, your children are absorbing that. In fact, I just read a study that was showing how parents are coping with COVID is having a huge impact on their kids. And even when parents are like, no, I'm fine, everything's fine. Kids are so intuitive, right? It doesn't matter what you say, they know. So this is a really important time for you. And if you care about anyone around you, then you're going to be doing even more self-care.
Well, it's funny, my daughter's 18 and she's downstairs, and I walked down right before I did this to make my drink, and I said, how you doing? She was like, I'm fine. I'm like, you should tell your face. It's just not the message that it's sending. And it's hard not to absorb other people's emotions when they are so contagious and they're not positive, right? Or at least neutral.
Yes. And I will say, and this is just a personal thing, for me, I try to be really aware of when my kids are not in a good mood, to let them not be in a good mood. Right. Because I want, there's already a lot of heaviness in my house because of my husband's health, and we have 24/7 care. So we always have nurses in here, and there's a lot of heaviness in our house. And so when my kids are upset about something, I want them to, I know that your friend wasn't nice, but think about all the good friends you have. And for me, and again, I'm preaching to myself, but maybe this will help others. To me, letting them be sad communicates to them it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be in your emotions. Because I grew up in a household, my parents, awesome, but negative, even just using that term, distress was, no, we don't do that. We're happy. Focus on.
So how do you let someone, because I agree with you, how do you let someone sit in their emotion, but not let it rub off on you? So like, I know a lot of people are stuck in their houses with their significant other, and they have never been stuck for this long of a period of time. And I was joking with Jay, like, watching you blink is pissing me off. Like, you're blinking too loud. How do you, and especially like Trudy said, if you're an empath, how do you allow someone to sit in that and not take it on? Because that's kind of codependent, but
yeah. I have this notion that I married you for dinner, not breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So yeah, now we do all the time. Especially if you're an empath, it's an opportunity. We won't call it a challenge. We'll call it an opportunity for you to really say, you know what? First of all, I'm in charge of my own emotions. You can be you, and to give yourself that distance and to. I think a lot of times also we try to make it better so that we don't absorb it, but just kind of letting them be. It may mean, you know what, I'm going to take the dogs out for a walk, right. Not you. Yeah. Or I'm going to go in the other room for a bit. And it may mean physically distancing yourself if that's what needs to happen. And the other thing is if you think of stress goes from 0 to 10, right? 10 is the most stressed out you've ever been or distressed you've ever been, and 0 is no distress at all. When we are what I call in the red zone at a 7 out of 10 or higher, our limbic system hijacks our rational thinking. And that's also when we're more likely to, not be able to keep that distance. So in addition to maybe giving yourself some physical space, I would say also really address your own distress, because when you're at a lower level of distress, it's easier to say rationally, you know what, that's where you are right now. I'm going to respect that. And I'm going to go over here and read a book. But that's really hard to do when we're in the red zone, when our limbic system is hijacking our rational thinking.
And so this is totally selfish, but I just want to ask, so the way I understood it, our reptilian brain is just kind of heart rate, breathing, respiration. Our limbic system is where the amygdala are. Those are the fight or flight things that are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline and all of that stuff. And that's what causes us to flip our lid and not think logically anymore. Let's say you're flipped and especially, it's not funny, but you live with a significant, legitimate stressor and with a legitimate, well, not at the moment, but
you're still living with that. Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's sometimes people think, oh, well, she works with celebrities and they don't have anything to be upset about. I mean, they're rich and famous and everything else, but I think the strength comes from not avoiding the hard stuff. It comes from navigating successfully because of it and learning from it.
Yeah. And again, I so view it as they're just skills. They're skills that we all can learn of how to be resilient, of how to deal with difficult times, of how to view things in a different way. I mean, if you've never learned, I don't know how to speak Russian, what's wrong with you? Well, I don't know. I've never been to Russia. I've never heard really people speak. I've never learned the language. Of course, I don't know how to speak Russian. But if I moved to Russia and someone taught me how to speak and I would practice speaking Russian, I would get pretty good at it probably. Everyone would, right? But it's the same thing when it comes to stress. It's not what's going on in our lives so much as how we deal with it. And those are just skills. And if you don't have the skills, there's nothing wrong with you. You just haven't had the course yet. Take the course.
So you had a video on LinkedIn that I watched and you were saying like, if you didn't know how to speak Swahili, and it was so funny because when you said that, Evan's caregiver for 6 years was from Tanzania and he spoke Swahili. So when you're saying that, if you don't know how to speak Swahili, I'm like, Akupanda mama.
I can. Yeah.
I love David. I love you, Mom. I love you. So I know that your time is valuable and you've only got a few minutes left, but what advice do you have for folks as they try to navigate this situation and stay positive and be sane among their kids and their spouses? Yeah. What advice could you give?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is give yourself a break. And along with that, give other people a break. Right? This is a tough time. And so respecting that and respecting that other people may not be navigating so as well either, first of all. Second of all, I mean, self-care. I say I'm recommending, I call it a 3x5. So 3 times a day for at least 5 minutes, do something healthy and helpful to address your stress. And that could mean a good night's sleep. It could mean, meditation. It could be exercising. And by exercising, I don't mean you have to go for an hour run or an hour and a half yoga. I mean 5 minutes of push-ups, sit-ups, squats, whatever it is. And actually put in your phone a timer to remind you 3 times a day for at least 5 minutes to do something healthy and helpful to address your stress. Because a lot of times what happens is people are like, oh yeah, meditation, that's a great idea. And then that was Monday, and then Friday, you know, oh yeah, I haven't done that.
Right.
Because life gets in the way. So literally schedule it out, make it a priority. And what that will do is, instead of letting that stress creep up, it'll try to keep it at a lower level, so that when something happens, you get on the news and you hear something, or your partner does something, or you know, something, I don't know, you get a piece of information that is scary to you. If it bumps you up 2 points and you're starting at a 2, you're at a 4. You're still what I call it the green zone, the yellow zone. If your average is a 7 and something bumps you up 2 points, now you're at a 9. You are not thinking rationally, and it's really hard to be the person who you want to be. That's when we lose it, right? I lost it with my 15-year-old the other day, and even as I'm like, you know, yelling and everything, I realized, oh, I'm totally in the red zone. I should just shut my mouth right now. So I would say, if you're in the red zone, if you realize you're at a 7 out of 10 or higher, don't let anything out of your mouth. Right, because that's when we see stuff we later regret. And don't put anything in your mouth, because that's when we're consuming things we later regret. #quarantine15.
Well, and I think it's so funny because people don't want to feel the negative emotions, so we try to numb it. We eat or we drink or do whatever we do so we don't have to feel it. But that only makes you feel it longer and more intensely. Yep. So it's counterintuitive. I think the question that every woman watching wants to know is, what is your secret to your eyelashes? The most important thing of the day.
I actually think this is the most important thing. I have started learning how to put on fake eyelashes. It is one of my goals. It is one of my goals. Because what happens is, complete transparency, when I travel, I often have a makeup artist who will, basically what I want to do is my hair and my lashes, because that's really all I care about. And when this set in, and I am literally sitting here in front of a video like 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day now. So I'm like, I am going to learn how to do my lashes. And the beauty is, I'm doing them now, and they aren't perfect, but no one can really see them. So thank you for noticing.
Great. They look fabulous. And I watched a YouTube video to figure out how to do it. And the trick is to put them on when your eye is open, not closed. Did you know that? Because when your eye is closed, they sit down. When their eye is open, on top of there. So, you know, life goals.
There we go.
I even painted my own nails. They look like it, but
yeah, I literally, the last piece of no chip came off today.
Yeah,
like done.
I went to the grocery store to try to find the fake nails, and they were all sold out. Shocking.
I'm gonna have to do my color very soon. So I want to. I was talking about the 3x5. I have a freebie. Can I get a freebie?
Please, please. I was gonna ask you.
What are you going to give me? Yeah. So if you go to ElizabethLombardo.com, I'm Elizabeth Lombardo, ElizabethLombardo.com/relax. I have some relaxation audios that I normally sell for now. They're free to you, and they're great not only to do your 3x5, so you're relaxing during the day, but for me, I love to listen to them as I'm falling asleep, or if I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't go back to sleep because my mind's racing, it allows me to get back to sleep. So ElizabethLombardo.com, relax. And then the other thing I just want to say before we go is, I know you said it was your son's birthday, but I feel like it may have been someone else's birthday in your family.
Yeah, I turned halfway to you. I turned halfway to 90. So yes, I feel like I've gotten a lot of the rough stuff done, and now I'm hoping it'll be smooth sailing for the back half. But
well, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. And if you guys want a resilient self-assessment and a self-care sheet where you can set some goals and focus on prioritize or scheduling your priorities rather than prioritizing your schedule, you can text the word strength to 555-888. So the number is 555.
Can be up there? Because I'm going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. 555-888 and the word strength. Well, listen, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. You have just been a light in my day, and I really enjoyed talking to you. I hope we can stay in touch and do this again. I wish you all the best for your husband and your family and your career and your eyelashes.
It's all about lashes. Thank you. I appreciate it. No, this is great. I love that you're doing this. It's just so important. It's so important not only to get this information out there, but it's so fun to get to, and again, I keep looking at this other screen, but to get to communicate with other people. So thanks. Thank you very much for having me on.
You are awesome. Have a wonderful weekend. We got a question. Do you have your books on audio? My third book will be coming out on audio, but my first two are not yet, although I will be doing that next week. What about yours? Do you have audio?
I do. Better Than Perfect and A Happy You are both on audio.
Awesome. And all that's on your website.
In fact, hold on. I think I have the, as long as I'm giving stuff away, I think that I have the Better Than Perfect audio. Hold on.
I want it.
Free. Hold on. Patty's my everything. She sets all this up. Nope, that's not it. Okay. I think it's like audio free or something. Free something.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, sorry. That was.
We'll buy your book. It's worth it. It's a great title. Better Than Perfect. I love it.
Yeah, no, I don't. I thought I was up there, but she may have taken it down. I basically have no control over my own websites.
I don't either.
Patty's in charge of that, but now oh, there you are. I lost you. Yeah, no, sorry. I would love to give it to you. I don't know how to give it away, but if you go to Relax, at least you can get some free relaxations.
Perfect. Well, cheers. Right. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to end your week with us. Elizabeth, wishing you all of the best, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Ann. Take care.
Right. Bye.
Bye.